Thank you, Pushkar. Thank you, Anurag. We will get to our panel one for the program today. I would like to introduce Dr. Ashutosh Shastry, who is the lead for that particular session. Dr. Ashutosh Shastry is an engineering lead advanced platforms at Illumina. Ashutosh's expertise encompasses microfluidics, nanofabrication, semiconductor processing, surface engineering, biosensors, system architecture, and integration. Ashutosh, as we all heard, is the conference program chair for today and will also moderate the session one. Welcome, Ashutosh.
Thank you, Iran, and welcome all of you. So, I'll uh, start with just a synopsis of what you're in of, today, the different sessions. You know, saying innovation in all the different spheres of health technology is a daunting thing. So, how are you? So, so the decision was what to keep and what to leave out of the session. And I thought we are really fortunate to have two really accomplished and very different backgrounds join us for this conversation. Mm, uh, so, and they'll tell us from their perspectives the learnings and the wisdom that they have gathered, having been through different phases of a company. So, so that's session one, and I think right now we should just get started with that. So, Samir, could you please join me? And Dinesh. All right, you could sit here. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we can wait for the panel discussion. No, this is good. Now, after this for the panel. All right, so let me introduce the first two for the fireside chat. Uh, Thinking innovation, we were hearing about number of patents. I mean, yeah, Samir has 200 plus patents and is also a member of Academy of Engineering and Academy of Medicine uh, as and a professor at Harvard University. But he also has 10 startups that he has founded along the way. And we do relate in one of them. So this was a wearable patch pump, the Strategent Life Sciences story. Um, so, so, so that will be his perspective of where does that innovation begin, right? And we all want our technologies to have a big impact, right? You want many people to use them, and I mean, so many of us are aspiring entrepreneurs here. If you raise, say, $6 million, and in 3 years your valuation is 42 million, you think you've done well. If you start a company and sell it to Pfizer, you think you've done really well. Okay, Dinesh has done both, and he didn't stop there. Now he's founded his third company. No, not the third, but Protagonist he founded in 2006, and he's grown this company over the years to over $2 billion market capitalization. So, so yeah, and he's still enjoying the journey. So I think if you think of impact, I thought he's a good example of what we can call impact. So, so welcome both of you, and see, so, where to start? It's always a tough thing where to start, and many times, as technologists, I think some of you would share that guilt. We get so enamored by the technology that we become a hammer looking for a nail. Very unlike what Anurag would advocate, you need to begin by needs finding and validate your needs and so on. So, but not everything begins like this. Some of them do. So for you, I was just curious, why drug delivery?
So actually, I would say drug delivery probably chose me in many ways. Uh, I I'm a chemical engineer by training. I did my undergraduate in India, thinking that I'm going to be working in some sort of petrochemical plants because back in the 80s, that's what chemical engineers did. And then I came to do my PhD with Bob Langer, and those were early days of Bob Langer. I
Right.
was infantile by that at that time. Bob had just joined chemical engineering department at MIT, and he was doing something which I thought was just fascinating, using engineering principles to solve problems in pharmaceutics and biotechnology. And I was just fascinated. And that's how I got involved in drug delivery. And early on, it was really about figuring out how to introduce more quantitative science in drug delivery and therapeutics, how to think about the problem from the engineering perspective, and how do we really think about drugs in a different way. I mean, I remember my first conversation with Bob, because as an undergraduate, I had no exposure to biology. The last biology I learned was in high school. And I told Bob, I don't know anything about biology. They said, are you an engineer? That's okay. Because you'll figure something to say. And the unique perspective is what really important here. And that's how I got started. And I loved the field so much that I have continued to do so for the last 30 years.
I love the word perspective. All the education ultimately gives us a unique perspective, and that's what we bring to a problem. And so, in the problem solving journey, what was one of your most impactful innovations that you consider? What was that eureka moment? Okay, this is something great that I'm up to.
It's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, Ashutosh, I don't quite believe in the eureka moments. It's a misconception that problems get solved in a quantum jump like that. Most of the time, they get solved step by step. But my big learning moment, if you will, actually came towards the end of my PhD, and it wasn't in the lab. Uh, as a part of my PhD, I had developed this technology for delivering drugs transdermally, and we published it. And it was published in the journal Science, and they are really good at getting the word out. So the word spread that this new way of delivering drugs transdermally can be potentially used for delivering insulin. And within a few days, I started getting letters from parents. When can we use this device for my daughter, for my son, for my brother, my sister? And that was a revelation, if you will, because up until that time, research to me was a means to get a PhD. Get your PhD, get a job, and move on professionally. But that was the first time I realized, or the situation made me realize that there is more to research than just publishing and developing technology. It's about impacting the patients, and that completely changed my perspective on drug delivery. And ever since then, uh, that's been sort of my sort of key thinking principle, if you will, about choosing problems and figuring out how to develop them through research.
Cool. So, Dinesh, how did you identify this whole oral peptide delivery? It's a non-trivial, challenging problem, and what made you commit to it that this is worth pursuing?
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. If you are here on a Saturday morning and committing a whole day, it means you are really interested in what will go on during the day, and hopefully we all will learn a thing or two that we can take away at the end. So thanks again. Now, in terms of oral peptides, I mean, that's the holy grail in the field of peptides. And Protagonist, the company where I have been since 2008, we have been exclusively focused just on peptide therapeutics right from the get-go, even when peptides were not fashionable. Now things have changed with these obesity drugs, like everybody is becoming an expert in it. But what happened is, like, in the beginning when we started, we said, look, we will work on injectable peptides that are as potent as antibodies. And the difference will be our peptides are, let's say, 50, 100-fold smaller in size in comparison to the antibodies. So we'll have advantages of better tissue permeation, better access to the target site, things of that nature. And on the basis of that, we inked a research collaboration with Ironwood Pharmaceuticals back in 2011, and things were going amazingly well. We had a development candidate, but ultimately it was like, no, we are not going to take it forward because the advantages are theoretical, and before we know, we would have sunk in $100 million. So then the revelation is, God, this is not a big enough differentiation. And these were the early days, desperate times, right? So as they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions. So I was like shoved in a corner, so to speak. It's like, what do we do? And then our eureka moment was, but it came after a few years, but it's like, hey, instead of injectable, injectable peptides versus injectable antibodies, what if we said oral peptides versus injectable antibodies? And I talked to 5 or 10 people that I respect, and they all said, that will be wonderful, that will be great. How are you going to do it? I said, that's another problem. We'll figure it out over the years. Fortunately, we did figure it out, and here we are. But that's how it came into being.
Super. So yeah. So on the slide, you can see this was the innovation journey and the spark of innovation where it all begins. But it's really lasting long enough is the game, right? Like, can you?
Too long.
No, but you did not, what is referred to as that valley of death, right? It could be the technical risk, it could be the marketing risk, regulatory risk, anything, or just access to money. So any and all of these are potentially threatening, and you were successfully able to cross more than one, I'm sure. So
yeah, no, I mean, look, so I mean, as most of you know, seeding a company is probably easy. Series A is easy, but then going from Series A to Series B is what I refer to and have experienced as the valley of death, right? Because that is when it's like, okay, because that is the transformative thing. And in our case, it was no exception. We were down to a few $100,000 in the bank, things like that. But early on, what we figured out is like, okay, we are not credible enough to go to investors at this stage. And so we have to do something different. So we lean towards industrial collaborations, if you will. And that is where Ironwood Pharmaceuticals came into our contact. And that's a story in its own right. They were developing a peptide drug, but interestingly, they had no real internal expertise beyond that. And in us, they saw that expertise. So I still remember, I mean, this was January 11, 2011, right? Lot of ones, and maybe around $100,000+ in the bank for Protagonist. And in those days, that was the JP Morgan week. What we will do is we'll have our board meetings on Wednesday or Thursday of the JP Morgan. And I was so glad to walk into the board meeting with a signed contract, which paid us $2.5 million upfront. So that was our way out of the valley of death, so to speak. But once again, the theme that time was injectable peptides. So we worked diligently for like 3 years. And we earned about $10 million from Ironwood. But in the end, it's like, yeah, we had a development candidate which had nowhere to go. I describe that as like, you win the battle but lose the war. As a researcher, it worked. As a collaboration, it worked tremendously well. But in the end, the product didn't move forward, right? So one thing that we put very heavy emphasis on, because we are all excellent researchers and entrepreneurs. So our projects will work, but we have to be very mindful of like, we are not working in silo. There is a whole planet around that. So sometimes the competition will outdo you, things like that. And you just have to be mindful and make sure you don't fall into this trap of winning the battle and feeling good about it. No. You have to win the war.
Awesome. Yes, so Samir, I was thinking about this uh, again, going back to the previous stage, the proving out a concept in the lab where, uh, if you could narrate some example of, okay, here was an innovation which uh, was both challenging in terms of just bringing it to life, and also very satisfying because you were able to cross.
Yeah, so there is the pattern is very similar across all the academic innovations, and not only in my lab. I would say that's probably common in most uh, academic labs. So if you look at a typical academic project, uh, you need ideas, you need people, and you need funds to get them to a point where the concept is demonstrated. Of these, I would say people are the easiest to get, at least in my experience in academia. Uh, Students come in, very optimistic about their future. They are excited to participate in innovation. I don't think I ever had an experience where I told a project to a student and student said, that's too risky. I don't want to do it as a part of my PhD. There are some ideas where I would not invest my $100 in that project, but they invested 5 years of their life without hesitation. And that is, in academia, mine and other people's best asset. We don't have to convince them. The ideas are important. And again, there are many ideas. And the challenge there I've seen is that you need to really be honest about the potential impact of the idea. In academia, it was true, then it is true now. You can pretty much do anything and get anything published. And if publication is the only game, that works. But if you really want to do something important, you had to ask yourself, is it going to move the needle? Move the needle in terms of advancing scientific frontier, in terms of disease treatment, whatever that may be. And that I see as still a big challenge, because there is so much distraction in terms of what could appear shiny, but it's not really gold. So staying away from that, that's uh, second challenge. And the third is funding, which in academia is still a tremendous challenge, because there is not a great appetite for risk in terms of the funding model. There is funding from the government agencies, etc., but that is to move the project once it is already kind of demonstrated. The early seed stage is still low. The funding is low. Uh, if you look at a typical grant mechanism, there are 10 reviewers reviewing a grant, and they all pretty much have to say excellent before it gets funded. In fact, there is a joke in academia that if 9 people say excellent and one says very good, that's not good enough. Very good is not good enough. Which is very different from industry, right? You can go to 10 VCs, and if one says okay, you can get started. So that model needs to change. So my challenge as an academician is, how do we get that first seed going, seed funding going? And that's where a lot of internal investment from the university, a lot of small gifts. These are really small. Like $10,000, $20,000 gift can get the project started. That's been my challenge. Uh, and see the project through that, and then everything else follows. So there are many specific examples. Pretty much every company that we have started pretty much has gone through the same journey. It's like you tell the idea, it sounds crazy, who wants it? And then maybe it will happen. Oh, it's happening. It's cool. And it goes on. But maybe the specific examples we can kind of leave for a follow-on discussion. But I think the gist of it, which is pretty common to all the projects, is I think the essence of getting academic discoveries and innovation from the point of conception all the way to eventual commercialization.
Right. And there's so many uh, projects where different ideas get incubated, but only a select few you must be considering, okay, worthy enough that, okay, now this is showing some promise. So what does that process look like, uh, and how has that evolved over the course of these different companies that you have spun up?
It is constantly evolving. because I mean, if we are telling ourselves that I know how it's going to look like 5 years from now, I'm just fooling myself, right? So things evolve literally daily, weekly. So every PhD project has evolved typically on a monthly to quarterly basis. And I think the key is to be really honest to yourself and see, is it really moving the needle? If not, how do we get it aligned to a point where it does move the needle? And that's what we have done in every project. And I think, just because we complete the project doesn't guarantee that it's going to be ready for commercialization. Because one of the challenges that I have faced is that the academic world rewards complexity. If I have a technology with 5, knobs and 3 actuators, it's great, makes a great publication. And each of those things becomes a liability when you develop a product. So one of the things we have done is that, but in academia, you have to follow that paradigm. So what we have done is we develop the technology in the academic setting, we publish it, and the moment we want to commercialize or want to make a switch, we kind of take it into pieces and reassemble it with only the essential pieces that are required. Again, that sort of speaks to the honesty as to what is needed and how do you build the technology. And once you do that, I think at least you eliminate unnecessary things. And one example I'll give Ashutosh is, and this goes back to my uh, uh, first experience with the venture, where we had developed ultrasound for transdermal drug delivery, and we wanted to develop the technology. So we started a company, and the first thing we learned when we started it is that pretty much everything we did in the lab as a part of the PhD is not going to help us make a product, because the skin is so variable that you cannot develop a device which produces the same parameters. It's going to produce 10 different results, and that's basically going to kill the product. So we immediately had to invent a new way to develop a feedback system where we are constantly measuring the impedance of the skin and adjusting the ultrasound parameters. And that actually was one of my, I would, very proud inventions. Had nothing to do with the key innovation, but it had to do with a piece of it. Without that, the product would not have developed. So, and there are many examples of that category in pretty much every product that has come from the lab.
That is so true. You know, uh, when something works for the first time, it's so exciting that that's proof of existence. But once it becomes a product, if it doesn't work one time, everybody is upset because it's not reliable.
Yeah.
So this is a very different way you look at it. So Dinesh, that brings this question, this whole innovation in early stages of a company, you're fewer people and probably very high skilled people. So I can imagine it must be easier. How do you, but as you scale, as you grow, how do you keep that same culture alive? What do you look for in people and setting the team culture?
Yeah, I think, and most of you know this, it's like in startups, you just, the first dozen people are a different breed, so to speak. And then the one of the challenges as the company grows, how do you retain that as much as possible? I had a board meeting this week on Thursday, and look, when we started in 2008, we had a Series A that was 9 million, but the pre-money valuation of the company was 1 million. And we are not showing off, but now we are at 2.8 billion, so it has been quite a journey, right? Uh, but what I told the board was like, and we have 2 products that are in phase 3. One is partnered with J&J, the other with Takeda. The Takeda drug, we are doing the phase 3. We will do the NDA filing, all that kind of stuff. So at one end, we have a very matured clinical team. But then, there is always this question about like, what are you going to do next? Was that just a lucky break you got in the beginning, or is your platform really of substance? And is there room for repeat performance? So we are after repeat performance now. But what that does is like now you need a drug discovery team, just like you had in 2008. So my statement to the board was like, Protagonist is almost biphasic. At one end, we have a very mature clinical team. We have BD people, pre-commercial people, that kind of thing. But we also have 40 employees out of 130 who are drug discoverers. And these folks, they are working as if they are just in a small biotech startup. And seriously, that's the mentality. So you can create silos within the organization, right, where different functions dictate different kind of work style and personalities and talent. So we are trying to preserve all of that, right from de novo discovery all the way to NDA filing approval, hopefully after 18 months, that kind of stuff.
But yeah, this is such an awesome insight that you really need to keep some distance with how things are normally done in a large part of an organization for this small select group of people.
Yeah, it's like, just don't forget your roots, how you started, whether it was a protagonist or, your very first job, whatever, that kind of thing. And the common theme that we have is like, it's really a very resilient culture. Every entrepreneur has to be. And if you can kind of make it contagious throughout the company, then that's even better. So that's how we have prevailed.
So Samir, when you look at these different technologies and companies that have come out of your lab, how do you measure success?
There are multiple ways of measuring success. I think from the scientific perspective, I'd like to see ideas which change the way people think. I think that has a lot of potential in terms of producing an everlasting impact, because that changes the overall approach towards it. I think that can be done in publications as well, right? So when the word is out, people read it, people follow it, and decide what to do with it. When the idea goes into a company, then there are the metric change. I think the financial success is very important for the company. Otherwise, commercialization is kind of
the stock price is a good indicator.
Exactly. And I think Dinesh, you know this better than I do. I think when we start company from our idea, for me there is some kind of motivation from seeing the idea realized, right? So let's say it's my idea, it's our idea, and when somebody makes a product, there is some moment of pride. But to make that happen, investors have put in money, and they are there to benefit from it. So I think it has to all work. It has to work together. So the idea has to be transformative. It has to be practical. Patients have to use it, and it has to benefit from all stakeholders. And not every time all the metric can be made. I mean, there are many examples where the ideas were great, the technology was great, but it wasn't a commercial success because maybe it wasn't ready ahead of time, whatever the reason may be. But I think my goal or my objective from early on is to, if I were to define an ideal technology or ideal innovation, it's the one that benefits all stakeholders from conception all the way to commercialization.
Good. So now I'll keep this a rapid fire, like short answers to very pointed things. What is the most valuable non-scientific skill that you look for when you're hiring?
Resilience.
Okay, resilience.
You wanted a short answer, right? Okay, so
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. Storytelling skill. Can people communicate? Can they tell a story? And you want a short answer, but I'll add more context to it, because until it is fully demonstrated, you had to tell people why it is important, and those who can convey the ideas in an effective way have a better shot at taking it to the finish line.
Best practice for academic industry collaboration.
Start the dialogue very, very early on when you almost have nothing, and build on that over the years. And then you will have your moment. But it's like start way early.
Start the collaboration very early.
No, just the talk. Like you say, you need a good storyteller. So it's like you have to start talking about your idea, the concept, and each time, the next time you meet them, it's like, hey, now we made this progress, that progress, so that is continuity. Like with Ironwood, for example, which was our first collaboration, we were talking for more than 2 years before finally they said, okay, this is the first time ever we are writing a check to someone else. And it was a modest 2.5 million, but that is the one that allowed us.
But it took 2 years of storytelling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And each time showing progress.
Right.
So
showing progress.
And my short answer is keep the lawyers out of it. Things take a long time. All these conversations start, but they take a year or two just to get to a point where the first experiment can be done.
We have been reminded last few minutes, so just future gazing, what all is on the horizon? What are you most excited about?
So this is a bit protagonist centric, but that's the universe I live in. But it's like oral obesity drugs, and the obesity drugs in general. I mean, they are just gonna change the landscape, I think, of medicine. We always been talking about a miracle pill. I think now finally it's there. It's as you know, it solves so many comorbidities, and we are in the field of peptides. We know a thing or two about oral peptides. The two drugs that are out there from Novo and Lilly, those are injectable peptides. So it's like an open invitation for us. Right. So that's what I'm excited about. Oral obesity drugs.
Awesome. No, I agree with that. I guess,
and yeah, we are going to need a lot of help from formulation.
Very good.
Actually, we are in dialogue with Vivtex, the Bob Engler company,
Fantastic.
right? So,
yeah. I guess, one thing I would add in terms of future is the cell therapies, cells as drugs. And the reason I'm interested from a delivery perspective is that, the field of drug delivery has always been about how do we support the drug and get better therapeutic value from it. When there are small molecules, it was about solubilization, peptides was about stabilization, delivery, nucleic acid was about encapsulation, targeting. When we have cell as a drug, it's a living entity. It's a very complex entity. It can do a lot, but also has a lot of challenge. So I'm very excited to see how the field of drug delivery adopts to cells as a therapeutic and builds new cell therapies.
All right. So what is the parting advice to biotech entrepreneurs here? This has to be short because now.
Yeah. I see the warning signs. You're going to see and observe a lot during the entire day. What I personally do is, at the end of the day, there has to be one thing that I will take away. Now, this is so non-relevant, but I was at some health retreat a few months ago. The only thing that has stayed with me is like, hey, drink a tall glass of lukewarm water in the morning. For whatever reason, that has stayed with me. So similarly over here, for each one of you, take away something with you which you can actually put to use in your professional and personal growth.
One message, if I were to summarize, Ashutosh, is that innovation is the game. I fully believe in it. That's the way that we can basically make an impact. And it is good to find that one idea, one innovation that can be transformative. You mentioned a lot of numbers in terms of how many patents, paper, etc. But in reality, the impact comes from doing one thing right than doing many things. So asking ourselves what that one thing is and focusing on it and putting all energy into it and not expecting others to immediately recognize it. But if you are honest to yourself, honest in the sense, are you really challenging yourself? Eventually, it will get sorted out and people will realize it and reward for that. So find that one thing and stick with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah.